Welcome back to I-24 News special coverage of the war on Israel. 34 days since Israel was attacked by Hamas. Over 240 hostages are still in Gaza. Fighting is continuing in and around Gaza City. We'll go straight to our correspondent, I-24 News correspondent, Robert Swift, in the Gaza front. What's the latest, Robert?
The latest is that there's information coming out from the US with regards to the possibility of pauses on the ground. Now, National Security spokesperson John Kirby has stated that it's his understanding that that Israelis have told him that it's possible that pauses may take place in order for humanitarian activity to take place there. However, Kirby reiterated the fact that it is neither the Israeli nor the US position that a ceasefire is expected, and that both US President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have both either stated that a ceasefire is not the correct option or that it is not something that is on the cards for now. This all takes place as the Israeli military is continuing essentially to encircle and invest the Hamas infrastructure in the north of the Gaza Strip, with the Israeli military today saying that it had isolated an area that it referred to as a military quarter with headquarters and military manufacturing as well as intelligence capabilities in the north of Gaza Strip. It said that its units had dismantled these as well as killing a number of Hamas fighters in the area.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much for that. We'll get back to you later for more details from the south. Here in the studio are now with me Dan Pfefferman, Executive Director of Sharka and co-chair of the Gulf Israel Policy Forum. Sharka is, of course, very much involved with the UAE and Israel relationships. We'll talk about that in length. And Doron Avital, former commander of IDF Special Forces. Good evening to you as well. Let's start with this announcement by the White House. De facto, we had these kind of pauses every day by the IDF in order to have Gazans move from the northern part to the southern part. What do you make of this announcement?
I think it's a nice new terminology, no ceasefire, but a pause here and then when it's needed, humanitarian causes, and also if indeed some brokering of a deal, it would require those pauses. A pause, not a ceasefire. That's right. That's the new policy.
Yeah, and the question is this imposed just along this road in the middle of Gaza, or there's much more to it?
I think the two venues. One, of course, the humanitarian and the fact that we want this flux of people going south, and it's successful. We see them go south. I think there's 100,000 left only in Gaza, which is a good indication for us. We want less civilian. And the next thing is all those rumors or leads about brokering some deal, so we need those pauses for the deals. I think this is an indication that the strategy that said go to war, circle Gaza, and it doesn't contradict the idea of brokering a deal or rescuing the hostages, because those are the two objectives of the war.
Who are currently the players around the deal?
I think Egypt and Qatar, some sort of a competition between the two, whoever would win. But as I heard when I came here, that Ismail Haniyeh is in Cairo. It's a big deal. Let's see what comes out from those discussions.
Right. Then let's talk a little bit about the regional effect. We've been wondering for quite a while what would be the effect, maybe the biggest challenge so far to the Abraham Accords. How do you see this?
It's going to be, it already is a short-term challenge. We see that day to day, everything's been paused. Business relations, there's no tourism, of course, right now. And of course, the public mood in these countries which signed the peace treaties, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, is angry. It's impatient. Of course, they're very sympathetic with the Palestinian civilians, and that's fine. What is important to note is, first of all, the UAE and Bahrain were the only two countries that issued clear condemnations of Hamas. While the Saudis didn't officially issue such a condemnation, their press, if you read Al Arabiya and Arab News in English, they are going after Hamas while also criticizing Israeli leadership, calling for restraint, of course, civilian casualties. I think what we're going to see is continued work on the Abraham Accords. and can maybe enhanced efforts to make some kind of progress on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. With what we call in Hebrew a bear hug, right? Chibuk dov, so that there is positive pressure coming on both sides. And we're already seeing indications from Ramallah that the PA, which until now has been hesitant to go back into Gaza on the coattails of an IDF operation, is now speaking in much more positive terminology on that end. I think once the dust settles and the public pressure and anger calms down, we are going to see a return to the Abraham Accords and a return to the Israel-Saudi talks, because it's in the strategic interests of these players in the region.
Do you think that the Saudi move will be now even more connected to the Palestinian issue than beforehand?
I can't imagine it being otherwise. They realize, and if Hamas achieved anything out of their instigating this war, it's going to be to make sure that the Palestinian issue is front and center. Of course, Hamas wants complete destruction of Israel. They want not 67, they want 48. That they will not achieve, and I don't think the region or the international community will let them achieve. But the one thing that I think becomes more and more clear after this event and after the international outrage and the attention that it's grabbed, is that we cannot ignore this issue anymore. And you see that, of course, it's inflaming the West Bank, which again was part of Hamas's plan. And so we need to deal with this constructively in a regional framework. And this is what I can imagine will come out of this once the dust settles.
Yeah, you agree to that, I see.
No, I think there's a clear indication from the U.S. I mean, they come to our aid, but it's clear that paradoxically, as it sounds, contrary to the attempt of Hamas to derail this initiative, the initiative would come big time, and very much true, it would come with emphasis on the Palestinian case, because Bibi was trying to sell it without the Palestinians, with minimal concession to the Palestinians. There's no question that the game afterwards would be a game in which the Palestinians are players, the Saudi are players. Let's see whether the Israelis are players.
Yeah, and that's my next question. Is the Israeli public ready under these new circumstances?
Yeah, exactly.
To consider what's at stake here?
I think we'll have to see what would be the game of the conflict. How would it end? Whether we'll redeem some of our national honor in this context, and we'll be ready to come out to some kind of an arrangement with the Palestinians, and what's going on in the West Bank, because the West Bank now also goes in flames, and we have to be very careful. And what kind of a government and what kind of a political havoc we'll have in Israel when the dust settles. So many open questions.
All of that means time, maybe even a long time. And how long will this idea of the Saudi initiative, of the Abraham Accords, how long could that still be on the burner?
I can imagine this is something that'll take months before it gets back to moving. And
I think you're optimistic, but
of course I'm an optimist. That's my job. But you mentioned retrieve our national pride. It's more than that. We have a national vulnerability, a giant wound that needs healing, that needs restoration. We need to establish deterrence on the most individual level in this country, and it's very hard to make peace when you feel like you're in a position of weakness. And so we're going to have a long road ahead. And of course, as you mentioned, the political challenges that will happen the day this is done. We're already seeing the political backfighting starting to heat up in the background. We're going to need to see, I think, for the Israeli public to move forward on this, you're going to have to see some real leadership. You're going to have to see some real regional leadership and a different tone in voice from whoever the moderate Palestinians across the table are going to be.
And I would add a new kind of leadership. I think the whole political infrastructure in Israel would have to change. Event like this doesn't go without real consequences, and then we'll see whether there's a leadership and a public to follow this leadership to a new logic in the Middle East.
And what about leadership on the Palestinian side?
Well, there's a weak leader there, an old leader. The question whether there's a new leadership, whether it will be possible to do it, whether they can overcome those corruption allegations and the mistrust that the Palestinians have to them, tricky.
It's not at all clear who's going to replace Abbas when he steps down, for whatever reasons he steps down. There are, of course, rumors about Dahlan being brought in by the Gulf countries. But these are, of course, all rumors. Dakhlan, of course, has his original base of support in the Gaza Strip. It's not clear how much support he will still have there. But it's becoming more and more clear that you will need to work in some capacity with the Palestinian Authority, and they're going to need a lot of regional support and international support to make that happen.
Okay. Stay with me. Meanwhile, more on the war front from I-24 News defense correspondent Jonathan Regev, who reports.
The Israeli flag rises high and the anthem is heard on the Gaza beachfront deep inside the Gaza Strip. Shortly after, IDF tanks appear on the beach road running down the Gaza City coastline. Step by step, the IDF takes on a bigger part of Gaza City. As the forces move forward, they once again see how in Gaza there's no distinction between terror and civilian infrastructure. This stairway leads to a terror lab where explosives are made and suicide drones are manufactured. Next to it is a shaft leading to a terror tunnel. And what's right next door? A room where 3 little girls used to live, right next to the terrorists.
October 7th came from here. Came from houses like this. From houses like this, 1,500 Israelis were murdered or slaughtered.
The main Hamas headquarters are mostly located under the Gaza ground. Those above the ground are well entrenched in residential areas where civilians are used as human shields. As opposed to Hamas, the IDF is interested in keeping civilians away from the fight.
We're trying not to harm innocent people. We give all the people that live here a good heads up that we're coming. We need to evacuate till the Gaza Lake, which is going south.
While this is happening in Gaza, there's no let-up of the anti-terror activity in the West Bank. A major operation took place in the city of Jenin on Thursday morning, as IDF forces entered the city under heavy fire from local terrorists. Palestinian reports say as many as 10 militants were killed in the operation, as other Israeli forces also entered the Balata refugee camp in the city of Nablus, another terror stronghold in the West Bank. Along with the northern border, there are 3 constant active arenas, meaning the IDF is fully stretched and ready to engage on all of them.
Yes, Doron, here in the studio, it's getting more and more complicated.
Yeah.
How can Israel deal with that over time?
Yeah. I mean, entering Gaza, we are talking about urban warfare, we have the tunnels, still civilians. I'm a veteran of Beirut 82, but I think Gaza is a real challenge, and because we didn't have in Beirut this infrastructure of tunnels, and now if you add to it the hostage issue, without the hostage issue, I think it will be much easier, we'll go much forcefully, and we can finish it in a matter, I think, I'm not sure days, but with the hostages issue, it's a big challenge right now.
Yeah. Meanwhile, at the West Bank, so far, so good?
But today, it's the Jenin incident, this is serious. This is like, we had to use air power, and it's escalation. So we have to really try to contain it. All those preventive arrests were in place, of course, of all those Hamas operatives and all those engagement with terror in northern Samaria. But still, we had a terror attack of this family. So tricky. I hope it won't go in flame, because this is not a front we want to open up.
Right. I want to ask you then about the capability of absorbing by the Arab world, namely the Gulf countries, of what's going on here in terms of human toll in Gaza and elsewhere.
By absorbing, do you mean physically? Absorbing or understanding?
Mentally. Understanding, yeah.
It's not clear to me that the average person is seeing the extent of what's happening here. I'm talking all the way from the Gulf, Morocco, where we have a community and operations and an office, and in much of the Arab world, they're just not getting this news. Of course, those who are trying to watch international news or reading, CNN reports, etc. But what we would consider a balanced reporting of the news, certainly, and anything amounting to seeing the Israeli perspective of things is very rare in these countries, and so they're really only seeing a one-sided view of things, and that's not to mention, of course, much of the fake news and the propaganda, the Hamas propaganda that's being passed around social media with a lot of intensity and a lot of sophistication by Hamas and by their backers. So in much of the Arab and Muslim world, people are not getting a full picture of what's really taking place here.
Yeah. And you know what? Not only in the Arab world, I mean, it's a continuation of a big struggle here to get the real big, honest picture. I want to ask you about the Qatar and their role in all of this. How do you see this from your perspective?
Qatar has long established itself as a player that can have points of leverage. And so it's always on good terms with all sides, and it knows how to use its leverage. Al Jazeera is a point of leverage. Its funding of Muslim Brotherhood, including Hamas, is a point of leverage. Its relations with Iran is a point of leverage. Its positive relations with the United States and the Al Udeid Air Base is a point of leverage. And so it can play whichever side is most beneficial to itself right now. As of right now, it seems that it is trying to play a constructive role. We know that the director of the Mossad and the CIA director were both in Qatar today, trying to discuss a possible solution to some of the hostages. And so it seems Qatar is trying to use its role, at least right now, in a constructive manner. But a lot of the incitement, a lot of the radicalization of this region is also coming from Al Jazeera, which is a Qatari-backed and hosted and run global news station. So that always must be kept in the balance of what Qatar does and the role it plays.
Right. Also, Doron, they host the leadership of Hamas, which will eventually put them in contrast with Israel.
Sure, and we shouldn't forget in the long run that many of those Hamas leaders will be target of the Mossad, and the question where we will try to target them and so on. Yes, but in the context right now, the hostage dilemma is a real dilemma. We need them, whoever can provide any answers and broker some kind of a deal. I think we will follow it. Of course, it will create itself a dilemma. If they broker a small deal, what does it mean to the other hostages and so on? Of course, the dream of any one of us in this studio would have been of some heroic rescue operation in Gaza, which I'm not sure the prospect do not exist, but it's tricky. So yes, they have a role to play, and let's see.
Yeah, we're getting some reports of maybe releasing of a very small number of people, but we'll check this and get back to this later. The NGO Honest Reporting claims photographers usually employed by media outlets in Gaza may have known in advance about the October 7th massacre. Senior correspondent Owen Alterman will report about this later. That goes back to the story of getting the facts out, which is getting to be more and more difficult at this day and age. Social networks. We have just, before coming to the studio, we saw that actually footage of Israeli helicopters attacking terrorists are being circled as Israeli helicopters killing Israeli citizens. That's how bad it is. How can Israel deal with it?
The role of the international media in granting legitimacy to internationally recognized terrorist groups is something that we've been dealt with, a challenge we've been trying to deal with for a long time, without much success. I have to say, in this conflict, it seems that the international press has done a better job of reporting in a balanced manner than in past conflicts. But if this is true, the allegations that came out today that journalists employed by AP, by Reuters, by CNN were embedded with this terrorist massacre, as the pictures seem to indicate, then this would be incredibly grave, and they're going to have to do a lot of soul searching and house cleaning inside of these agencies.
So let's first watch the report by Owen Alterman.
Pictures of the October 7th massacre, not only from Hamas perpetrators, not only from Israeli survivors, but also here from photojournalists entering Israel from Gaza, the subject of a report out Wednesday from the pro-Israel watchdog group, Honest Reporting.
What were they doing there so early on what would ordinarily have been a quiet Saturday morning? Was it coordinated with Hamas? Did the respectable wire services, which published their photos, approve of their presence inside enemy territory, together with the terrorist infiltrators?
The central questions are about the role of a journalist. At what point is a journalist too cozy with a terrorist organization? And at what point must a journalist step out and prevent a war crime? At the expense of that journalist's core role, documenting events and explaining reality.
They were there. They witnessed terrorist attacks, these people. And instead of trying to stop these terrorist attacks, they photographed them to the world. They did things that were unethical.
One photographer, a freelancer working with AP, seems to have relished the attack. And here is seen smiling with Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza.
If there were journalists who knew about the massacre, who stayed quiet and filmed while children were being massacred, they are no different from the terrorists and will share the same fate.
There, senior Israeli leader Benny Gantz drawing his conclusion Thursday, with a unit of the Israeli Prime Minister's office calling the photographers, quote, partners in crimes against humanity, and asking media outlets for clarification, as Israelis focus their anger at those they see as Hamas's helpers.
Right. Back to you here. You see the allegations, not totally clear, but it's nothing that we've seen before.
Yeah, if it's true, then they are part of the attacking force, and the verdict, I think, as Benny Gantz put it very nicely, they are terrorists, and this is it. But there have to be investigation. We have to check whether they were knew about it beforehand and joined the forces with a clear intention.
Well, they did not carry weapons, according to this. They just carried cameras, but just to be...
It has to be investigated, but...
It can be argued if a camera is as dangerous as an assault rifle these days.
Cameras now are the weapon of the future. It's like part of the weaponry of the future.
What do you think, by the way, about the film that was edited
I didn't see it.
You didn't see
myself...
Let's just say 47 minutes of horror, sheer horror, that was edited by Israel's IDF. You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it on purpose. I could have seen it. I think in terms of what is needed, in terms of the public opinion abroad and diplomacy, for sure it has to be used. I'm not sure the Israeli public needs to see it. I think the Israeli public knows what happened. And I think also the warriors in the battlefield, they know exactly what happened, and they have to be cool-headed when they go after the effective objective in the war. So I would introduce it as a diplomatic tool, but I would stop there.
Yeah. Tens of thousands of Israelis are displaced from their homes these days. I-24 News' Emily Francis went to Jerusalem to meet some of them and some people who helped them.
Welcome to Shalva, an oasis that has brought comfort to thousands of young people with disabilities and their families.
We began designing Shalva, which means peace of mind in Hebrew, or serenity, in order to provide families with a sense of peace of mind and getting away from the chaos that ensues when a parent learns that either at birth or later, the child he dreamed of was going to be with a disability of one kind or another.
But since the tragedy of October 7th, the Shalva Center in Jerusalem has become a safe haven for those evacuated from communities near Gaza who lived through the terror of their lives.
So the IDF is telling us you have to get out of here right now. So we couldn't get out earlier because the roads were dangerous. So we're locked in our town for 3 days. And then finally the IDF says, okay, we'll get you a safe route southwards, right, on the Egyptian border, right? So this is like a whole big operation, and we're driving down the road in like lines of over 100 cars and buses with helicopters protecting us from above and tanks and jeeps surrounding us.
Sion Leshem and 150 families from the small village of Neve were welcomed by Shalva, which has been a godsend. Of the 700 children evacuated from their village, the girls are getting a full day's education at Shalva's facilities.
The healing has begun, and every person that comes to us and expresses their compassion and their love and their will to give and what can we do and how can we help is part of this healing.
You're seeing lots and lots of folding cots. These are beds that can be...
The reason the Shalva Center has been able to provide these resources is because the 220,000 square foot facility was built from the beginning to also serve as a national crisis response center.
And what you're seeing here are the preparations for us to be able to take in up to 1,200 additional evacuees. So here you've got beds, you've got lots of sanitary wear, and all the different provisions that we have. We have downstairs in the car park dry goods enough to last us for a month. We have the entire building is 11 stories high, but a number of those are below ground. We're built into the side of the mountain, and that provides a natural safe space.
Shalva has also been a lifeline for dozens of at-risk teen girls from abusive homes who are part of the Eden Center, which is located near Gaza.
Eden girls lived on Kibbutz Karmia, which is on the northern border of Gaza. A beautiful, quiet kibbutz. From the boarding school, you could actually see the view was a view of Gaza. Boarding school was actually targeted and hit by a rocket, and there was a lot of damage made over there.
So them not having school that day is why they're alive today?
Them not having school today is why they're alive today. You could say that. It was, we say it was a miracle.
And for Caro Ron, the education manager of Eden, she says being with Shalva kids with disabilities has been the best medicine for her teens.
And I think it's special for them. They're seeing that there's other types of people around. They're seeing that they know they've got their own issues to deal with, but they're looking and seeing that there's people with different issues and sometimes more difficult issues. But I think that mainly it makes them happy. Like, they always greet the young people there who are working or being treated there. In the elevators, they always play with the little kids.
No question, it will be a tearful goodbye once everyone is able to return home to the South. And all agree that the support of the team has given them the courage to return home with more strength.
We're going back.
We'll take a short break. We'll be right back here on I-24 News with more special coverage and some new details about the hostages. We'll be right back.